All righty, welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, serving online information entrepreneurs throughout the US and the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am super excited to welcome our guest today, Ron Reich. Welcome, Ron.
Hello. So glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ron and I connected, gosh, a little bit ago now. We have a mutual friend, Jay Facette, in common, and
Hmm.
I reached out and we had an initial conversation, and I thought, we need to get Ron on the podcast, and he's got a lot going on in the background of his life. So Ron, we'll let you share on that, but I'm thrilled that you're here with us today.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you so much for having me once again. And yeah, I just remember we had our initial kind of, the Jay Facette connection. Yeah, Jay's an awesome dude.
mhm.
And we had our initial, whatever you want to call it, like initial Zoom chat, getting to know you type chat. And I have a lot of those types of chat with people, and I know you do as well. I think most people listen to this, or many of them do also, and they don't
Mhm.
always have like a strong like chemistry, a strong vibe. But I really felt like after we were talking, we just had like a really good energy there, and I'm really excited that we're continuing the conversation here on the podcast.
Excellent. Well, I love that. I feel the same way. I love connecting with folks. I love hearing their stories. I love connecting people in my network to each other that I think could make magic or just at least need to know each other. And so
Hmm.
I'm always so thrilled when I discover somebody new and we're able to connect in this way. And in your instance, I know you've got a lot of information and experience that will benefit our listeners. And so I'm super excited to dig in with you. For those of you that don't know Ron Reich is a sought after marketing strategist and consultant, a former lawyer. And I love this piece, Ron. I think you are
Hmm.
maybe lawyer number 3 to come onto the
Oh, I'm
podcast.
flattered. Thank you.
Well, of the other two, one is also a non-practicing lawyer. I joke that you guys are smarter than the rest of us and you got out of it. One is still a lawyer, but he is really in like the patent space. So quite
Gotcha.
different than what I do, but also very complementary. So yeah, I'm always thrilled to talk with another lawyer. But so Ron was a former lawyer, has been selling online for over 10 years. After launching over 50 of his own products in a variety of niches, I always want to say that word wrong, niches, he later became the secret weapon behind many of the biggest names in the industry, including Hay House Publishing, Todd Herman, Selena Sue, Denise Duffield Thomas, and Ryan Levesque. His current focus is in helping emerging experts scale from 6 to 7 figures through his proprietary Genius Profit System, or GPS, framework. Ron, welcome.
Thank you once again. Excited to dive into everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So, talk to us. I would love to know a bit about your roots, how you got started in marketing and consulting. I know that that's not always a straight line, and so I'd love to hear about some of your early experience.
Yeah, never a straight line, like nothing is. What's the like Steve Jobs has that famous quote that you can only connect the dots looking backwards, right?
Mm,
And yeah, it is definitely it's yeah, I wouldn't say I'm an accidental consultant, but kind of that in the sense that so to give you I'll give you the relatively quick version of the story is that I was in law school, and
mm-hmm.
I decided to maybe not you relate to this. The reason why I went to law school in the first place was because I honestly I was afraid to get a job after graduating college, or like when it was like I remember it was like my the summer of my junior year of college, and I was like working in this warehouse, just like this kind of dumb summer warehouse job, packing up boxes. And I was like, work sucks. Like this is not that cool. I did not want to be working for the rest of my life. How can I could stretch out the school thing? I'm kind of cool like studying. Then I was like, well, there's some lawyers in my family. One of my friends is going to law school. Hey, I'll just go to law school. Anyways, long story short, I kind of was never like really all in on becoming a lawyer. And then I actually, in the my third year of law school, I actually discovered kind of this whole idea of information marketing. It wasn't really called online marketing at the time, but it was called information marketing. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I want to do that. And then I found out about this guy named Dan Kennedy, who's essentially kind of like the godfather of the information marketing industry. And then I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. Then I flash forward a couple of years, or I guess about a year later, and in California, when you I think it has one of the longest lag times for getting bar results. So in California, you take the bar exam in July. It's twice a year. It's like February and July. I took it in July, and you don't get your results until November, so you have to wait like 4 months. And it was
Mm.
essentially during that 4 months, that's when I essentially started officially my first information marketing project. And at the time, the experts, people like Dan Kennedy, were saying you should teach things that you know about. And so I was like, okay, well, I know a lot. By now, I know a lot about law school and taking the bar exam. So my first ever product was how to pass the bar exam. Actually, it was actually a how to be productive in law school product, like a study guide for law students. And then I launched a how to pass the bar exam type project. And then and I essentially did that on the side, and then I did get my first lawyer job, after getting my bar results in November. And essentially, during when I was working as a lawyer, from day one when I started working as a lawyer, I already had my internet marketing, my information marketing projects, and so I was kind of one foot out the door there, if you know what I mean. And then, yeah, long story short, I worked 2 years as a full-time lawyer. Then I essentially moonlighted at nighttime and doing all the things to get my internet marketing, information marketing business off the ground. And about essentially it was about 2 years later, I was actually in a good enough position where I was making almost enough money. It actually wasn't quite really enough. I'll just give you the actual numbers. I had about $25,000 saved up for my lawyer job. And I was consistently making at that time about $3,000 a month from my business. And I was like, oh, you know what? For a variety of reasons, which I won't get into, I was like, you know what? I think this is going to be a time for me just to tear the band-aid off and quit my lawyer job. And that's when I decided to become a full-time marketer, full-time information marketer. And then yeah, then essentially fast forward, I ended up worked in a few different niches. The how to pass the bar exam and the law school, that market, it wasn't quite big enough. It wasn't really the best market for me. I didn't really make a ton of money from that. Then I later on got into like the dating and relationship space, selling programs in that niche. Then I actually did some things in the dog training space. So these are to be kind of lower end information marketing products. And then when I was doing that, I ended up hiring this guy, Ryan Levesque, to coach me. This was back in 2012. And then long story short, he coached me for a couple of years, and then he started to really blow up. He put out this best-selling book called Ask. This was in late 2014, early 2015. And then I really knew his stuff really well. So he invited me to work in his business. I eventually became his marketing director. And then that is what kind of got me into the more online education space, helping entrepreneurs grow their business. Essentially spent 2 years working as his marketing director, like behind the scenes. And then it was about a little, oh, wow, time flies, almost 6 years ago, early 2017. That's when I ended my engagement with Ryan. We're still good friends. All was cool. And that's when I really branched out on my own and really started coaching and consulting um, and coaching entrepreneurs on how to grow their business. The thing that's interesting is that this is kind of the whole connecting the dots, looking backward type things, is that the reason why I honestly started working with Ryan as his marketing director, honestly, if I'm being totally candid here, is that because I kind of needed the money at the time, because I didn't because my other businesses, primarily my dog training business at the time, it wasn't doing really well. So I was like, oh, I was in a little bit of I was really kind of using credit cards to grow that business. I got in kind of a cash flow crunch, and then that ultimately is what then I ended up working with Ryan, and then I ended up doing what I'm doing now, and I'm really happy doing what I'm doing now as a very well-known and awesome coach consultant in the online marketing space. But to be honest, it's one of those things where um, at the time, like in the early so I took that job in 2000. That would have been mid two.
Oops.
I had all sorts of grand visions of making $1 billion with my dog training business. So had that business really took off, I do not think I would be doing what I am today, if that makes sense.
Totally. Well, your story is such a great example of the twists and turns that lead to, where so many of us land, which looks quite a bit different than where we started. And
Absolutely.
yeah, a couple things that stand out in particular about your journey is one, like most people who put in the time to go to law school and like the commitment and the hassle that it takes to actually pass the bar exam, it's fascinating to me that you were able to pull the plug on that so early, right? And walk
Mhm.
away. And good for you. I think so many people choose a career and get started and kind of get sucked in feeling like, well, I invested, like, especially when you look at what it takes to even get a legal education these
Mhm.
days, right? That's a big investment. What was it? Was it just the realization? I know you mentioned thinking like, oh, this really isn't for me. How apparent did that have to become for you to be willing to walk away? And do you think you could have done that without developing the side gig that you had going on?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because a couple things are true. So like, because my third year of law school, I was really into a couple of things I'll just kind of talk about. My third year of law school, I was actually really into that's when I got really into Dan Kennedy. I was listening to his stuff all the time. I was really learning a lot about online marketing, information marketing, as it was called once again.
And
And so I kind of
I'm so curious, even on that point, the Dan Kennedy stuff. I've got my own Dan Kennedy story, but
oh cool.
I want to hear yours first. How did you come across his stuff? How did you get introduced to Dan Kennedy?
I will actually I've never actually told this story on a on a
The
on a
podcast.
podcast. Let me I might ask you to edit this out later, but I'll tell you the story. Back
Okay.
when I was this was when I was in essentially when I was in college, when I was in high school, I was no in college. I was not very good with women at the time. And then I found out about this guy by the name of Ross Jeffries, who is kind of the godfather of the, let's just say, generally the dating and relationship business, or
Mm-hmm.
that industry essentially.
Yep.
And I kind of got into his world, like consumed honestly, quite a few of his products. I got into his world. And then in one of his newsletters, he mentioned, oh, Dan Kennedy, if you want to learn how to make money, Dan Kennedy's the guy you should check out. And then right after I read that, this was when I'm sure this was when I was in college. So this would
Yeah.
have been like my junior year of college. I went down to the library and checked out this book by this guy named Dan Kennedy. And it was pretty cool because he had this very like contrarian attitude. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, this guy is cool. And then that kind of planted the seed where I was like, okay, in the future, when I want to learn how to make money, Dan Kennedy, that's the guy who I'm going to learn from. And then
Mm-hmm.
my time when I was like, oh, I want to learn how to make money, that is kind of what ended. That I started at least learning about that, really exploring that when I was in law school. So that's exactly how I heard about Dan Kennedy. And then where I was going with this was that, so at the time, so yeah, so what I was saying is that, so I did have this vision, like of like, okay, I'm going to be, at the time, essentially, I had a few different visions where I was like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'll work as a lawyer for a couple of years. Maybe I'll do like estate planning, and then I'm going to build up my estate planning practice, and then I'll teach people how to market their estate planning practices.
Mm.
That's kind of like the model that was kind of happening in the Dan Kennedy world type thing. Like people would they would build their like restaurant business, or they would build their chiropractic practice. Then they would essentially start teaching, develop an information product on how to do this. That was kind of one vision that I had. Another idea that I had, which is like, well, if I want to be a really good business person, I should learn how to litigate. I should be a litigator, because that's where I'll learn
Mm.
how to like negotiate and be a badass and be aggressive and things like that. Which is, so I kind of had this image in my head, which is kind of, in hindsight, this is like, I kind of like got, not, I wouldn't say sucked in, but I kind of just told this story that being a litigator was the cool thing to be. Like that's what I should aspire to. And so then I ended up like applying for litigation jobs. I did civil litigation. And it turns out, for a variety of reasons, maybe you can tell by just our conversation, is that I'm not a very confrontational person. I was not designed to be a litigator. So it's kind of like one of those things where, like, for me, giving up my litigation job was not that difficult at all. You know what I mean? And I kind of did, like, I always kind of, again, I always had this, again, from day one when I started my law practice, or when not, I worked for a firm. When I started working as a lawyer, I was working, I had a vision of quitting that job really from day one, and having a successful online business. So it really wasn't that difficult for me to, from that investment, from that like sunk cost in quotes
Mm-hmm.
aspect. I didn't really have that. It was just more the fear of like, oh man, like, kind of, what is it, like jumping out of a plane without a parachute, or whatever,
Yeah.
or whatever you want to, whatever metaphor you want to use.
Yeah. Well, it is fascinating to me how people, like, where ideas come from, right? And like along your journey, you were implementing some of these very early, right? I don't think a lot of people are that fast at implementing. Does that feel true to you?
Yeah, it's I would say that's always been one of my strengths, to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
is just being a super implementer, for sure, and kind of just doing whatever, like, read, of course, I think I'm in the top percentile. I'm definitely not perfect, but I'm better than most, I would
Mm-hmm.
say. And yeah, so that obviously, that served me quite well. One of the actually things along those lines I learned, I went to an actual Dan Kennedy seminar in
Mm-hmm.
this was in 2006. So this is actually, I remember, this is the first ever like live event I ever went to. This was November 2006. So this is when I was essentially, I think this was actually, I actually remember, I got my bar results on November 17th, 2006. So wow, how about that? Almost exactly. This is 2003.
Wow.
So no, they're 2006. So almost exactly however many years ago that was. But anyways, I think I went to that Dan Kennedy event. That was early November. So this was essentially right before I got my bar results. But anyways, at that seminar, one of the big things I learned was that, I remember Bill Glazer, Dan Kennedy's partner at the time, he said, good is good enough. You don't be a perfectionist, just like ship things out, and you're better off just shipping
Mm.
things out without them being finished. And I just took it to heart. I was like, okay, cool. Just get out there and do it. And again, that's yeah, overall that served me quite well. And I know a lot of people, they just spend way too much time, planning and getting ready and getting ready. And
Yes.
I've done that in other contexts. But yeah, overall, yeah, I never really, yeah, I never really had a big barriers when it comes to implementing. Once I kind of knew what I had to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it is really easy, particularly in the space that you're in and that you coach in. It's really easy for people to get stuck around the learning piece, and then continuing the learning, and then learning more, and then learning the next thing, like before they ever go
Yeah,
do, right? And
yeah.
like, I
Mhm.
find it fascinating that you, first of all, were drawn to law school, which that is a particular kind of personality for the most part. But,
Mhm.
people, I think, tend to be more perfectionist, kind of
Mhm.
cautious types. Not
Yeah, yeah.
always, but I think there's definitely a core group, that are in the legal world that are that way. And
Yeah,
it
I would
sounds
say,
like
yeah.
you really
Go
bucked the trend, like being able to have that part of your personality and have this other part that allowed you to move quickly and implement, and really embrace the good is good enough. That, I think, is a phenomenal piece of advice for entrepreneurs. And I think a lot of attorneys would struggle with that.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. Yeah, another just piece of advice that I would give people that I think will really be helpful for those listening to this is I really can't remember exactly where I heard this to give credit for, but I think it was in the context of somebody, or I was reading an article about how they develop software, how they build software companies. And the idea is that when it comes to software, you only want to, smart companies will ship their software to market when it's about 80% completion. This is a really good rule of thumb for anybody who's doing marketing. You're better off putting something to market when it's 80% done versus waiting for that perfection. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb. People have that perfectionist things. And of course, before we started, we were joking about technology, or unfortunately for us in real life, these software companies do this, and this is why every software has bugs, even if they're backed by billions of dollars. So but yeah, it is a thing for sure. But on the other hand, those are the most valuable companies in the world, or at least among the most valuable companies in the world. But one thing I'll just it's kind of interesting that you say that, because I actually I'm overall a really conservative person. Like if you take any of the personality test, the one I like a lot is the Colby test. Are you familiar with that one?
I am familiar with the Colby.
Okay. Do you know what your Colby score is?
Yeah, I can pull it up here. I don't have it memorized. I'm not like, I had somebody on here who's like a Colby robot. You could just
okay. I used to, I don't want to spend time on this, but I'm actually good at predicting people. I'm good at people. One of my superpowers is predicting people's Colby scores. I actually won't do it with you, but I will predict. And since you're a lawyer, yours is probably pretty similar to mine. I'm a 7.842. And anyways, what that means is that the third one is quick start. And that's essentially how for those who are not familiar with Colby, that's kind of like how good you deal with like risk and uncertainty, and how much of an innovator you are. And a lot of entrepreneurs are like 9s, 10s on Colby, on quick start. And the fact finder, that's the first one. That's like how much research you do before you do a project. So a lot of entrepreneurs are like really low on fact finder, but they'll be really high on quick start. Like that's kind of a really common thing.
Well, you're tremendously high on follow through, a 7.8. This is what from the outside looks like implementer, even though you're low on implementer, you're good at follow through.
Yeah,
right?
The names are the names, especially the name implementer. It doesn't really match what it is, because implementer is more about like how much you like are hands on, and how much you can see the final vision. So it's someone who's like my brother's he does ceramics. Like an artist would be high on implementer, for example. And a follow through is kind of like how much you follow a specific system. So I am like the lawyer part of me actually is very like methodical, really into research, really into like doing my homework, and then kind of following the system. But so again, I guess that's like but I had enough of that quick start to just kind of
no, I love that.
So
we are the same on fact finder. So I'm a 7 fact finder. My follow through is much lower. You're an 8. I'm a 3 on follow through. So I'm much better at leading teams and putting the plan in place, and also delegating, right? And then my quick start, I'm high quick start. So I'm 6 on quick start.
Okay, gotcha.
And then 3 on implementer.
Yeah, I'd imagine. Okay, cool. So we're kind of flipped on the
follow through and the quick start. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, but it is super fun. Like I love it when, you learn some things about yourself and then get to observe about like how it actually shows up in your life, right?
And I will pat myself on the back. I was 50% right. I got you on fact finder and on implementer. So
right. I know. Well, it has been fun actually to learn a bit about the Colby. I have several current connections that are all about it, and it's actually helped me learn quite a bit. But your advice is, I think, really, really important for people. And the fact that you are so high on follow through means that you've actually had years of experience doing the things that other people often think about or try to start, right? And often don't like walk through to completion. And what better way to be able to teach people than through the lens of experience? The really quick on the Dan Kennedy, and then I want to move on to some of your current stuff. But early on in my journey, when I was setting about to actually create my second business, which was going to be and is a virtual, online business. That's the Legal
Mm-hmm.
Website Warrior. I got exposed to first Laurel Langmeyer and ended up
Oh yeah,
inside
I know
of
who that is. Uh-huh.
one of her coaching groups. And she put together kind of this high-end, kind of mastermindy type of group. And
Mm-hmm.
we all paid in advance, but to go meet with Dan Kennedy, like in a
Okay.
small group format and get some coaching. And so
Mm-hmm.
the story around that was that, like, it was an investment for me at the time. I was like, all
Mm-hmm.
right, this is like, I've got to figure this out. I need this
Mm-hmm.
piece in order to do well in an online business. And I had gone through IVF right
Mm-hmm.
beforehand and had almost died. When they did the
Mm.
procedure, they nicked an artery or something, sent me
Oh
home
geez.
bleeding out into my abdomen, and I lost
Mm.
like half of my blood into
Oh
my
geez.
abdominal cavity. And this was 2 weeks before I was scheduled to fly out and see Dan Kennedy, right? Columbus, Ohio.
Oh,
And
so you went to like, did you go to his house? Where exactly did you
look,
meet him?
no, like a conference center really close to his
Oh, okay,
house,
got it, got
right?
it,
So
got
we
it.
just had like one of the meeting rooms in
Got
the
it, got it, got it.
hotel. Yeah. And so, but I was so gosh darn determined over that
Mm-hmm.
thing. I was like, I was not supposed to travel. I was not supposed to be doing
Mm-hmm.
anything for like a month. Like I looked
Mm-hmm.
pale as a ghost.
Mm.
But I was like, heck no, I've paid for this thing. I am going. I
Nice.
got myself on a plane. It was actually a red eye. Arrived at like 6 a.m. and the conference started at 8. And then I had
Mm-hmm.
like, like 2 or 3 days of Dan Kennedy. Anyways, I always laugh. Like I'm always so curious, people's, especially the ones that really connect with what he says and who really have studied him. So much to learn there. And
Oh
particularly if you're
yeah.
in the online
Yeah.
world and have to
Oh yeah, for
basically
sure.
be marketing in everything that you do, right?
Yeah. If I'm being totally honest, he's one of the outside of my parents and my immediate family, he's one of the top two people that have influenced me in my life more than anybody else for a variety of reasons. So yeah, I'm a total he's
Wow.
definitely one of my big big role models who I've learned a ton from. And
Right.
one actually interesting thing, as I love your story about being determined to get at the event. That does say a lot. The other thing, and there's just a couple other fun notes, is that I don't exactly have anything that dramatic, but I will tell you that one event that I went to, my first Dan Kennedy,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's one of the most transformational events that I went to, mainly because um I ended up I learned a lot at the event, but I ended up purchasing a program that actually ended up being the seed of my first actual successful information product. And the other thing was,
Mm.
that's actually where I met the guy who became my first coach, this guy named Dave
Ah,
D, who I ended up joining his mastermind. And that actually was a big catalyst for me to quit my job. But anyways, that was a transformational event. And I actually did go to I did have to put that entire event on a credit card because I did not have the money at the time, which I think it ended up being like maybe $2,000 or $2,500. That was a lot of money for me
right. In
back when I was
2006, when you've just
yeah,
graduated law school with
when I didn't have
all
a
this debt,
job. Yeah,
right?
exactly. So yeah, and then so that was kind of interesting. Another thing I want to share with you is that so I have one of my friends, this gal, Leanne, she's really awesome. She used to work with Laura Langmeyer, and she
Oh,
actually, when she was like helping Laura out with some marketing type things.
well, I was gonna say
And
Leanne's name sounds familiar. I feel like
Leanne Kalal, maybe you know her.
yeah,
Um, so our friend Leanne, so she actually went to a VIP day with Laura or
Laurel.
Laurel.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually went to Dan Kennedy's house and she told me the story about kind of like being that. I was like so jealous. That make my dream come true to like do it. Because Dan has a whole structure for how he does his VIP days and all this like cool stuff. And
Right.
it's just like his house, but it's like if you're like myself, like a Dan Kennedy fanboy,
Yes.
super nerd, this is like going to like the Bat Cave or whatever the metaphor is,
Right. I know,
So
getting to see like his old cars and talk
yeah,
about the
exactly.
horse
Yeah,
races. And I
totally.
know.
Exactly. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Oh,
And
that's
then
so
another
funny.
then just to nerd, I guess just to nerd out on just a little bit. In some of his other programs, where he talks about like positioning and how he works with the client, he'll tell stories about like how he does these VIP days, and how he'll like do things like he'll purposely leave around like uncashed checks, just to like show how much money he has and stuff like that. And it's all very like staged and things like that. He also has like, apparently he has like this room that has all his swipe files into it, like in it. And so it's like when people meet Dan, they are, I don't know exactly where he does the meeting, but he does it like in whatever, let's say it's his office or his living room or whatever. And then every so often he'll leave and I'm gonna go get something from my swipe pile, and it's in like this other room, like nobody's allowed in that room. So it's like, this is like, you know what I mean, it's
The
just like
secret archive.
this is like, yes, this is like where Noah's Ark is, the whatever the word is, the 10 commandments are hidden or whatnot, so it's just really
Oh my
interesting
gosh.
how he goes about doing things.
Totally. Well, the thing that, that I took away from not only hearing from Dan, but also hearing from people who had worked with him is, how we get to create our businesses in a way that really works for us, right? Like nobody does business like Dan Kennedy. And
Totally.
you go to his house for a VIP day and you're meeting in his basement and you need to pack your own lunch,
Totally.
and you've probably just paid him $30,000 or $50,000 or whatever,
Totally.
right? But he definitely has a set way of doing things, and your piece about him being very contrarian,
Yeah. And there's
right?
something to learn for that. It is hard to implement, like even
Yeah.
myself. I mean, I would love to do a lot of the things that he does, but I can't, or I have not yet been able to do them just because it's like hard to do psychologically. But one of the big lessons there is that authority and have a strong enough intention, people will go along with the program. You know what I mean? It's like, essentially it's just our ability to ask for what we want and hold our ground, essentially, and have our boundaries. That's the thing that you know defines whether or not we actually get
Yeah, whether we get what we want. And just so
perfect role model of that.
yeah, you're cutting out just a little bit, so I just want to pay attention to that. But yeah, shifting gears a little bit, and I love what you last said, like asking for what we want, having boundaries. I think that like belief in ourselves, right, goes a long ways, even in the way that we talk about our business, talk about our services, etc. I'd love to know a bit more, shifting to current times. Some of the biggest issues, first of all, who do you support? Who do you work with? And what are the biggest issues that they face?
Okay, great question. So yeah, I primarily work with, most of my clients are female entrepreneurs. Almost all of them are coaches and expert types who are typically they're doing at least six figures, typically multiple six figures, about averages about $200,000 to $300,000 a year. And I really help them grow from that to seven figures and beyond, using really a frameworks that kind of combine kind of launches with high ticket offers, as well as evergreen marketing systems. It's kind of like, I really help them get there from a marketing standpoint. As far as the biggest, we were talking kind of about the implementation aspect of it.
Yeah.
I mean, the two biggest issues I see really, and I really do believe if you were an expert with any kind of a high ticket offer, especially, you don't have to, but I would say it is ideal, especially if you're a true subject matter expert. In my estimation, getting from, let's say $200,000 a year to $1 million a year, that's a pretty straightforward, linear, simple process. There's a pretty standard formula for doing it. Now it's simple, but not easy. You actually have to do the work. So a couple of the biggest issues that I see are that like people come to me because they don't have a good strategy for getting to that next level. They're just like, oh, I don't know what to do next. So that's music to my ears, because I'll tell you what to do. I am a strategist, right? So one issue that people who typically are not in my programs deal with is that they don't know what the proper strategy is to get to seven figures is. And then really the other, it's honestly kind of basic in the sense that the other issue that people have when it comes to just getting to that next level, it's really the biggest mistakes I see is and they're obviously very related. Excuse me. It's just a lack of focus, that kind of lack of focus, not keeping your eye on the prize. And related to that is like a lack of consistency and really just not implementing. It's really just not doing the work. I mean, a lot of entrepreneur types, they do have, kind of shiny object syndrome where in quotes, where it's easy to get distracted. So it's like, if you just stay focused on doing a few simple things consistently over an extended period of time, doing the things that work, it's going to be very difficult for you not to get to seven figures. I mean, the big issue I see really is that people just, everybody, they're just looking for they get bored, for example, or maybe they're just looking for the secret. There's a lot of people, especially in the coaching and online marketing space, that are selling them really cool, sexy things that's going to be their fast track. So it's hard to have that discipline to be like, oh, that sounds cool, but I'm going to continue with my boring plan,
Well, it's so important that you said that. I feel like so many people are continuing to look under rocks. That's how I think of it, right? Is it under here? Is it under here?
Right.
Is what I should be doing? Is it over here?
Right.
Could be shiny object syndrome. But I also think it's that, people either are not confident that they have the strategy or have the answer. And so it's partly that that need that a lot of expert-based businesses have to continue to educate. And then you have so many experts in that space telling them, here's what you need. Here's the solution. No, here's the solution.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear, I know you said you have a standard formula and it's really doing a few simple things consistently. Are you able to expound a little bit on that?
Yeah. So essentially, in just being conscious of time here. So,
Yep.
So let me say that, okay, so I'll go.
And you can choose one or two that are your favorite to talk about.
Yeah, I just want to see if I could just kind of process this. So essentially, what I would say is that big picture, once you have an offer that works, once you have let's say a coaching program that you've sold, let's say you've sold a few, then maybe you have a program that you've filled before, or you have like a one-on-one roster, like you filled up your one-on-one roster. So you already have some proof of concept if you're doing, a couple $100,000 a year. Once you have that, the main thing you want to focus on to get to that next level, to that $500,000 plus, is really, it's really just getting better at selling your existing offer. And so that means doing things like improving the actual marketing of your offer. It probably would include just spending more time, improving the frequency, just making that offer to more people, and not just that offer, but more invitations generally to maybe might not be to get an offer, but to get on a call with you, or to download your lead magnet, some kind of an invitation. And then the other thing that you want to do is you want to be looking at, because again, at this point you have something that works. You want to be looking at, again, where are your existing leads coming from, and essentially just do step one to getting more leads. Everybody wants more leads. Is where your existing leads coming from. Do more of that. I know this is really like rocket science, but this is actually the thing that works. So for example,
here's the thing, you saying this, people, I think, really need to pause and think about what this means. What comes to mind for me is I just met with our mutual friend that you introduced me to, James Schramko, right? And we had a conversation on his podcast, and then he came and visited mine, and he was talking about one of the things that he does is helping people peel away all this extra, like, for lack of a better term, just all this extra crap that they've built into their business that they shouldn't be doing, right? And it sounds like you go about that, but in a different way, like on the building front end, like, no, don't look over there. Don't do that thing. Like, keep it simple, stay focused. And I just love the reminder that people often are already sitting on the thing that works.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Like, here's like, so anyone, if you're listening to this, if you want to double, triple your income, I'll tell you how to do it in the next 2 to 3 minutes. So if you're a coach expert that's already doing, let's say, between $100,000 and $500,000 a year, I'm going to guess, and I have at least 80% accuracy on this. I'm going to guess that you get most of your clients from a combination of, specifically, referrals and speaking, whether that's speaking on other people's stages, doing workshops, going on podcasts, things along those lines. If you look at your stats, most likely you're going to find that what I'm saying is quite true. Thus, if you want to double your income, if all you did was spending your time just getting more referral partners or getting more referrals from your existing good referral partners, doing things to systematize that, and or depending on whether it's speaking or referrals, and or speaking, like probably you listening to this get a decent amount of your clients through speaking. What if you actually double the amount of speaking engagements, whether live, in person, or virtually, that you do per year? Again, your income would double. I've not met you, but I promise that for most people listening to this who are in that range, that's essentially all they need to do to get to the next level. But again, there are people that are selling them like sexy funnels, and
Yes.
agencies showing them how they're going to get 20 million Instagram followers and overnight and things like that. So, for most people, that kind of shiny object syndrome, like joining another course, a lot of that is kind of a procrastination technique in a lot of ways, where it's like, instead of doing the thing that's really going to help them, they're looking for that, like you said, looking under rocks in the wrong places.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's, when you speak about it in those terms, I mean, it does a couple things. One, I think it begins to feel a lot more accessible to people,
Yeah,
right? It's
absolutely, for sure.
like, I think when people think that they don't have the answer or they don't know the path forward, it perpetuates this problem of procrastinating or looking all these places. And then the other thing that it does is, I think it for me, I feel a big sigh of relief around, like, oh, you don't have to be all the places doing all the things, right?
For sure.
Because I think a lot of that gets sold to people as well that are building these types of businesses.
Absolutely, for sure. Yes. One of my favorite books is the book Essentialism. And yeah, the big idea there is do less but better, which is some of the best advice I've
Yes,
ever heard.
totally. I know. There we go. Do less but better. 4 words, right?
Right.
Um, so Ron, out of respect for your time, and it was so fun. First of all, a couple of things. Super fun to geek out with you about Dan Kennedy and some of the
Yes.
early roots of, getting into the online marketing space. I love the part of you that is really big on follow through and doing. I think more people need to hear from folks who really can share the wisdom that is where the magic is at. Like, go do, keep
hmm
doing, stop looking under all the rocks. And for folks that are thinking like, gosh, maybe I need Ron's support, maybe I need to check out his coaching programs. I know there's probably a variety of ways that you support your clients. Where do you like to send them to? Where are you online, and where do you like to connect?
Yeah, a great place to send people actually is this actually just follow me on Facebook. I post a lot of content on my personal Facebook profile. So hopefully you can put the link in the
Totally.
somewhere where
Yep.
people are listening to this.
Yep.
And then for those of you I actually have a special gift for your listeners, if you don't mind.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, please share.
Yeah, so I actually have. So if you've gotten this far, if you've listened to this, we've been talking for looks like about 40 minutes or so. So if you've gotten this far, I'm going to reward you by giving you actually a free access to my $1,000 course, which is my How to Make 50K in 50 Day. It's essentially my flagship program that goes quite deeper into a lot of the things we talked about today and much, much more. So if you send me a DM on Facebook and just tell me that you're a friend of Heather's, I will give you free access to that course to reward you for being a listener of Heather, and of course for, again, listening to this podcast to the very end.
That's amazing. Ron, super generous of you. If you are listening now, pop over to the show notes. You can find those at legalwebsitewarrior.com /podcast. Find Ron's episode and be sure to click through, connect with him on Facebook, DM him, take advantage of that free course. That is amazing. And I can attest to the fact that you do very well on Facebook. That's where I first came across your stuff, because I think Jay actually shared one of your posts and I resonated with whatever it was you were saying at the time, which is why I clicked through to connect. So
There
I
we
can
go.
attest, I know the Facebook algorithm works sometimes, folks.
Totally.
Ron, so fun to connect with you today. What final words of wisdom would you like to leave our listeners with today?
All right. Thank you for asking. Now, the thing I'll actually tell you is there's a really great book called The Trick by a guy named, I can't remember the name. It's like William something. Anyways, this guy spent like 2 years hanging out with a bunch of really, really rich people, like, people, billionaires, deca millionaires, these people worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And the book is called The Trick. He wanted to find out what their secrets are. He was this broke journalist. And then at the end of the book, he reveals the trick to becoming wealthy. And basically what he found out was that all these successful peoples, they were actually running in the wrong direction 99% of the time, but they were still running. And it just took them that one time to that 1% of being in the right direction. That was the catalyst for them becoming wealthy. So the trick really is to just stay running, stay moving. And of course, the faster you move, the faster you're going to find that 1% that's going to make all the difference. So that's what I would say is my big thing I would leave people with, is just stay moving. The faster, the better.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think that's a super relatable concept. And again, where the dots connect for me in my mind is this coming from somebody who's really good at follow through, right? Follow through is the movement. It is the thing. Like that is how you stay in motion, is doing the follow through. So I love that, Ron. Thanks for sharing that tip. So great to have you here today. And hopefully we can do one of these again sometime.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, and I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely.